Hey, it's Jordan. I am here with Kathy Myers. You are a school board member in Janesville, Wisconsin. You also ran for Congress last year in Paul Ryan's district, which I believe a Republican won ultimately. But
Mhm.
Wisconsin has, I guess, for the last decade, maybe before that, kind of been a ground zero of sorts for the decimation of labor, and now I would say the corporate welfare on steroids. So, real quick before we get to the recent developments, could you explain for those that aren't aware, what was the sweetheart deal to this company Foxconn, which is Taiwanese, that essentially gave them billions of dollars in tax subsidies to, as Trump said, open up a brand new factory that's going to create, I think, 13,000 jobs. What was that sweetheart deal?
Well, pretty much it was a deal where the taxpayers of Wisconsin, I guess that's more the outcome of the deal. The taxpayers of Wisconsin were going to foot the bill for this company that was supposed to come in and bring, just like you said, around 13,000 jobs. They said that it was going to pay on average about $54,000 a year. And originally, I think it was like a $3 billion commitment in incentives by the state, but over the course of time, it seems to have grown to upwards of $4 billion. I think I'm not sure if it's gone over that or not.
And basically, this factory, it was supposed to be a factory, was going to make
Mhm.
LCD glass for TVs and things like that.
Yep.
So Scott Walker, who at the time was trying to get something to win re-election, he lost. And Donald Trump, President Trump, was basically citing this, it's part of his, I'm bringing back all these factories and all the jobs and all this. So now, I believe less than a year after this announcement, all of a sudden it's like, just kidding. So can you speak about what Foxconn is now saying?
Well, I guess it kind of depends on the day as to what they're saying, because there were some statements last week by an official from the company that suggested that they felt it was no longer economically viable for them to manufacture the screens that they were talking about. And I think there's also been talk about screens, not just for televisions, but also, maybe downsizing that into screens for phones and that sort of thing. So trying to nail them down into exactly what the plan was, what they're going to make, has been very difficult. And then by the end of the week last week, they were saying that, no, 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 we aren't pulling back, even though we'd said that it's not going to be economically viable for us to come to Wisconsin. We're on, everything's good, but there still wasn't any reassurance about the number of jobs. How much of that is manufacturing? That's another thing that seems to have shifted a bit. They are now talking more about research and development and engineering kinds of jobs, which are, of course, are great jobs too. But what we really need in Wisconsin, what we also need in Wisconsin, are good, sustainable, middle class kind of jobs and manufacturing jobs.
It's interesting to me because you see General Motors gets a massive bailout, 11.2 billion from the federal government, 15,000 workers, goodbye. And, kind of suspect the reasons. You see in other areas this corporate welfare where there's no strings attached deals. Frankly, in my opinion, because these companies are paying lavish amounts to the politicians. And now, President Trump, who they're running on this myth of a booming economy, but I've been to Wisconsin, I've been to Michigan. It's not so booming. It's not booming for you and I.
Right.
So, how is it? Because new governor Tony Evers, from what I have researched, says he's going to honor the subsidies and the tax breaks to this company that was legislated in, I guess. So basically, it seems like a Houdini act that the taxpayers are footing the bill for this. And what
Mhm.
do? They're going to cut, heating for old people, food nutrition, programs for the middle class. Can you kind of talk about how is it that there's these no strings attached deals? Because Wisconsin's been decimated by Scott Walker and in many ways extreme conservatism mixed with neoliberalism.
Hmm. Well, it's it's an interesting, situation for the new governor, because the deal was made and now he's got to deal with it. He said he was going to promise to make sure that they hold up to their end of the bargain, and but again, it's hard to tell what exactly the details were of that bargain, that we're going to hold them up to. So I really feel like Governor Evers was left with an incredibly raw deal. I certainly, let me be really clear that I'm always interested, and we are always interested here in Wisconsin in great paying jobs. So when a company comes and says, we can provide 13,000 decent paying jobs in your area, it looks like a really great thing. But, all those other concerns and the inability to tack down exactly what the deal was, and of course the environmental impact of it, and, the subsidies and everything else, all of this has, it's kind of like we're now left holding the bag. So Scott Walker thought this was going to get him reelected. It was going to be, one way that he could fulfill a promise, and I'm glad to say that it didn't help him at all. And but now, of course, now what do we do? Now that the dust has settled, now it's not just it's a situation that we have to deal with, and I'm not sure exactly how it's going to pan out for our new governor.
And what's really interesting to me is the wider lens of this. I mean, nationally, although we keep hearing it was because of the Russian boogeyman, I mean, Trump won Wisconsin. I think he was the first Republican to win since the 80s in Wisconsin.
Yep.
And frankly, I was on the campaign trail, so I saw the rallies in Wisconsin and Michigan and Ohio, and he had them at NAFTA. I mean, he had them at NAFTA. These are real, a lot of them are good people, might have been just kind of hoodwinked by faux populism, but they're economically in pain and desperate. So both on the federal level of these trade deals that have kind of not had a backup plan for these displaced workers, and now this. I mean, how are people? You talk about the booming economy, but in Wisconsin and other places, there's not a lot of jobs available, like you're talking about, good paying with benefits.
That's absolutely true. We've got a lot of people that are working 2 or 3 jobs here. We have our minimum wage here is like $7.25, and so this is a really hard time for us. People are just barely getting by as it is. And, so it's interesting that you mentioned, Trump and NAFTA and all that kind of stuff. It just feels like this is just an extension of the hoodwinking that's been going on, not just with Trump, but with originally NAFTA. It really harmed us here, especially in the 1st Congressional District, where we suffered not only GM, the loss of that plant, but we had, a plant close in Kenosha as well. And so, the base, the manufacturing base that we used to really enjoy here, which meant that people had homes, and people could send their kids to college if they wanted to, and they had a sense of security, and it was just ripped right out from underneath them.
What's interesting, I remember interviewing somebody from United Steelworkers in, where was I? Michigan. And, honestly, the Democratic Party is to blame for this too. I mean, Bill Clinton signed NAFTA, but also you hear from, President Obama, well, globalization, and you need to, prepare for the jobs of tomorrow and retrain. Well, I remember talking to this steel worker who said, my union guys, they went through the retraining. Problem is, there's no jobs for them. So it's kind of this, on one end you have Trump making empty promises based on, salesmanship. And on the other, the Democrats have talked about retraining and this and that. But if there's no regulation on corporations or no strings attached that you must create these jobs, aren't we just kind of in this cyclical, the masses of middle-class people, competing for the scraps?
Well, yes, Josh, and the middle class has been shrinking for decades, and so this is nothing new. We've kind of always been, we're always affected by the winds, of the exchanges between politicians and corporations. And, I read the book Janesville, and it was interesting because so those GM workers who got retraining, went back to like Black Hawk Tech or University of Wisconsin, Rock County, and a lot of them really took that opportunity to really learn a lot more. And those that, ended up driving like 3 hours away every week to go work a job in, Indiana or something like that, 3 or 4 hours away at least. It was hard to tell who ended up faring better, because it was just what you say. These people in good faith went through retraining that was offered to them, and then they got out of it, and then those kinds of jobs were not available anyway. And so I think that, I think it's something that we need to be building into our relationships, as public servants, or public servants should be building those things into the relationships, where we are having a plan B, what happens. And by the way, I mean, this is especially with this company, there is, the past is prologue here. This is a company that's pulled out of projects in other parts of the world and in other states, and kind of, has, I don't know how they function, because it seems like they make a lot of promises, and there's a lot of pomp and circumstance with it, and then they just fold. Yeah. They just pack their bags and say, "Oh, didn't mean it. Sorry."
And this part of it hasn't been covered, but I mean, this story's barely been covered by national media. But there is real bad environmental impacts to Foxconn. Yeah. I don't even know if they did a full environmental assessment. They were seizing through eminent domain a lot of property. Can you kind of talk about the damage that's already been done and that's posed?
Oh, sure. Well, there's a lot of people that, have been kicked out of their homes. And, there's, of course, it's always questionable as whether or not you're getting real fair market value. But even if you are for your home, this is an incredible disruption to people. And it is also, you mentioned the environmental impact of this. There's a really high water table in that area. And you put a building that with the kind of footprint that Foxconn has in, well, that water's got to go somewhere. And so now, there's a lot of flooding over there, and now you've got that added into the mix. So now it's not flooding when there's a really severe rain. Now it's flooding when there's not very much rain, and so, and also, of course, they're tapping into Lake Michigan, and so. And this was done and able to be done because they were given a waiver of sorts, to that most other companies, would have to have. So you've got the situation where they got passes on what the actual deal was, and the specifics of the deal and what kinds of jobs and what exactly are they making. And you've got the environmental, waivers and winks and nods to them about that. And again, I want really good jobs. I would be lovely if they to have a company come in and provide those kinds of jobs and really good paying jobs in Racine. It would help with all sorts of things in that community, but at what cost? And so it's not a good deal.
Mm-hmm. And I want to ask you, when you big picture it, obviously, I think by the polls, country's moving to the left. Because, you see Bernie Sanders and the fight for 15 and Medicare for all and all that. So, I mean, just today, this wealth tax that Elizabeth Warren proposes, polling at, I think, like 60-something%. Yet we're told by Howard Schultz on his little interview blitz and Michael Bloomberg and, frankly, CNN and MSNBC, they basically just push this. It's not practical. This isn't practical, blah, 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 blah. Well, what do you call it when the majority of the country wants Medicare for all, free public college, a Green New Deal? I could go on, but the politicians say, no, Is that not a corporate coup d'etat, or am I missing something?
Well, it sounds like it, and I'm sure that Mr. Bloomberg, Mr. Schultz are wonderful people. I am a little tired myself as a middle class person. I teach, I have an ordinary life in an ordinary house, and with my ordinary car and everything else. I'm really tired of billionaires, and I respect their work, but the billionaires coming in and suggesting that they understand what my life is like. And and just because they're billionaires doesn't mean they're right. And we seem to, I think it's almost like it's like a continuation of the winks and nods that we've given Foxconn. It's like, because you're a billionaire, well, we're willing to just overlook a few things, like maybe your bad ideas or your unwillingness to do the things that we're asking you to do, or support the things that we're asking you to support.
Mm-hmm. And I'm not asking you like who you support, but to me, mm-hmm. I mean, I could read a poll. Bernie Sanders won the Wisconsin primary in the Democratic Party. Hillary Clinton, I think, what did she lose Wisconsin by a point? So yeah. Who do you think? Do you think Bernie Sanders' progressive populism could win Wisconsin if he were to run? Because it seems to me Wisconsin, a lot of what Donald Trump was selling was Bernie Sanders' policies. He just didn't mean it.
Yeah, I think so. I really think that a progressive could win Wisconsin. I think that the wave that we're seeing here in Wisconsin, with progressive candidates getting a lot of support, with the changes that we saw in all of the constitutional offices in Wisconsin in the last election, and all went Democrat, and so. I think that, that it is very possible for a progressive to win Wisconsin. You know what people really want to hear out of you is do you understand what their lives are like? Do you understand the whole idea of income inequality and about fairness? And that's what they care about most. And I think that they will respond to that out of a candidate.
And lastly, can you kind of talk about, I mean, I don't know how long it will take to reverse it, if reversible, the damage that Scott Walker did? I mean, I think in the never-ending Donald Trump media infestation, mm-hmm. Scott Walker kind of got a pass on his way out. And mm-hmm. there wasn't much focus nationally on I mean, Wisconsin, the economy in Wisconsin, I don't really care what they say, from what I could see, is part of the Gilded Age all over this country. So mm-hmm. can you kind of talk about the worst of the worst that ex-Governor Walker did? And do you see, I mean, Evers has been in office for 5 minutes, so I don't expect much, but how do we get Wisconsin back to its working class roots, which in part is we need an influx and strengthening of labor unions?
Absolutely. And, so the worst of the worst for me that Walker did was Act 10. Which decimated public unions and really had a profound effect on teaching in this state and on the quality. It wasn't necessarily the quality of the service, because the teachers are out there working like dogs and trying to provide for these kids. So I wouldn't want to ever suggest that, any disruption in our ability to serve our children is because of teachers not doing their jobs well. They are, but I'm on the school board in Janesville. We were losing teachers like crazy, and they were either fed up or they were being poached by other districts, or they were leaving education altogether. And so to me, that's the worst of the worst. I've seen things start to change. Part of it was districts like ours in Janesville reclaiming our control over our district and doing what's right by our teachers, and not necessarily just trying to erode our relationship with them by using Act 10 against our teachers. And so but it's going to be hard, I think, to replace or to regain the the prowess, I guess you could say, that the unions had in this state. Now, Tony Evers, I think, is already talking, about restoring the funds that were taken out by Scott Walker, and putting him back in education, and I really feel that he's going to do a lot of good things for teachers unions as well as all other unions.
Hopefully, because you're seeing all over the place teachers fighting back. So you definitely need leaders that aren't going to give it lip service and do something. So I thank you. I hope to be in touch. I'm going to see if I can get to Wisconsin soon, because I think these stories are not getting enough attention. And actually, I do have a question. I just got the bad news that I'm lactose intolerant. Does Wisconsin have non-dairy cheese? Because I've had the real cheese.
Well, I can't. I'm sure you can get non-dairy cheese here. I just cannot vouch for the quality.
Okay, that's what I figured. It's a terrible thing.
Sorry about that.
Yeah.
It's going to be a hard visit for you. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I know. All right. Thank you for taking the time.
You bet. Take care.